Thanks for having me, Brian.
So we've just watched as Donald Trump successfully pressured Jimmy Kimmel off the air, and we're watching as his administration officials, including FCC Chairman Brendan Carr, are doing a victory lap and basically putting in place the steps for the next cancellations. Is there anything that can be done as far as Congress is concerned, given the fact that this seems like it's a pretty overt attack on the First Amendment?
Yeah, look, I think to the degree that we get response from the administration, there we can certainly try to conduct oversight. But as you know well, we're in the minority. We don't have subpoena power, and this administration has ignored pretty much all Democratic requests for information. It is very clear that they do not believe that they answer to Democrats. So we have to take the next step here. And that is to really rally the people. And it's not just to oppose Donald Trump's actions, it's not just to pressure vulnerable Republicans with opposition to these authoritarian tactics. We have to go back to true advocacy and hold the businesses and corporations that are bending the knee to Donald Trump accountable. It is outrageous to me, not only that Donald Trump and Brendan Carr forced Jimmy Kimmel off based on absolutely nothing that is, I mean, frankly, it's not no hate speech. It's nothing. I mean, there it
Right.
is literally just part of his comedic show. But the fact that Nexstar, which is of course hoping to get approval for a merger, and Disney ultimately acquiesced. And we're seeing this over and over and over again. And you have Mark Zuckerberg at the White House asking after he announces a $600 billion investment in the United States, which he already had, asking President Trump, "Oh, I wasn't sure what number you wanted me to say. Was that okay?"
Right.
It is across the board, whether it's law firms, whether it's corporate America, whether it's media companies. We have to stand up for our democracy, because if we don't stand up for it and we don't force not only our elected officials, but also the corporations that we use to do so, then we don't we are really, really falling down a rabbit hole right now.
The way that this was able to be effectuated was because Brendan Carr at the FCC was able to dangle the prospect of either approving or rejecting this requested merger that would give, I believe, Nexstar, by merging with Tenga, like something like 80% control of local TV in this country. And the reason that they're able to do that is they're seeking an exemption to the rule that prevents them from having that much consolidation. It's basically otherwise a massive violation of antitrust in this country. Why does a partisan actor like a president's appointed FCC chair have the ability to subvert these rules that are put in place to prevent monopolistic behavior unilaterally?
Look, this is why Donald Trump has busted every norm and obviously many laws and constitutional requirements. There was never previously a political component to the approval of any mergers or acquisitions. To so many things, crypto, for example, or regulation of financial regulation. There are policy differences and there are policy disagreements, but Donald Trump has turned all of this into a partisan battle and political warfare. Not just that, he's also using his power for his own purposes, his own political purposes. So he is not just threatening, he is using the Department of Justice to investigate his enemies. He is using the FCC to threaten media companies with losing their license if they don't stop any criticism of him. And it's all part of a larger scheme here, which is to undermine every form of accountability, so that he can continue to take more authoritarian control over our government. That's there's no other way of looking at it right now.
You know, prior to coming into Congress, you were an attorney. Obviously, during the impeachment proceedings, you were very present there as well. Using your past experience, is there any likelihood, or is there any grounds for some type of lawsuit on First Amendment grounds against this administration, either on behalf of Jimmy Kimmel himself, or some other party, some other litigant, to be able to push back on what we're seeing happen at the hands of the administration?
Yeah, I think so. I think Jimmy Kimmel should sue. And what's shameful is that Disney did not stand up to Trump,
Yeah,
force him to actually take away their license if that's what he was threatening. And then if they did, file suit. Now, Disney, in theory, is a private company and it has, reputational considerations. So, the First Amendment doesn't apply in the same way. But
right,
the direct coercion by the government that is connected to Jimmy Kimmel's suspension makes this a government issue, in my view. And, I'm not a First Amendment expert, but I think it's important that everyone take every measure they can to fight against this authoritarian regime. And I am especially concerned about corporate America, who seems, and the tech world, where they seem like, you know what, I'm happy to just give up our democracy as long as, I get the regulation or the lack of regulation that I want that will make me billions of dollars. And it's kind of disgusting. And it's part of the reason why our system has become so divided and so unequal, is that you have these folks on top who are mingling with Donald Trump and bending the knee to him, and then he's giving them back the policies that they want, and that's how policy is now being made.
right.
It's really anti-democratic and unacceptable.
I mean, there really are, like, to put this as indelicately as possible, like they are showing themselves, exposing themselves as complete whores for this administration, whether it's CBS, whether it's ABC, whether it's Meta, whether it's Amazon and the Washington Post, whether it's the LA Times. I mean, on outlet after outlet after outlet, including these outlets that have hid behind these glossy slogans like "Democracy dies in darkness" back when it wasn't challenged, back when it didn't mean anything to say it. It was just a bumper sticker because who cares? No one's actually coming for those things. So why not just say it? Why not just bolster our credentials and our reputation by saying this kind of stuff? It really is telling that the moment it's challenged, the moment that they actually have the opportunity to stand up and defend the things that they have said about themselves, that they're the esteemed fourth estate that's going to stand up and protect democracy when all else fails, the fact that when they have this opportunity, they just bend the knee, capitulate instantly to Donald Trump, shows that they're not just full of shit now. They're not just these awful stewards of democracy now, but it was all a scam the whole time, because now is when they can actually bear out that thesis that what they were saying was accurate.
There's a big difference, though, between what happened in Trump's first term and what is happening now. There were a lot of corporations. There were a lot of business leaders who spoke out against Donald Trump, who opposed what he was doing, and took him on. I mean, even Jeff Bezos was ridiculed and attacked constantly by Donald Trump, and he still managed to try to hold the line. And certainly, as you point out, who's going to stand up for our First Amendment if not the media,
Right.
freedom of the press?
Yeah.
But this time around, we're seeing a totally different view. And I think the reason is that they know Donald Trump is completely for sale, that everything is transactional. They know if they give $1 million to his inaugural, that he will make sure that his policies line their pockets. And they'd rather do that than have to fight with him. And that's how we lose the fundamental values that this country is founded on.
Congressman, what are you hearing from your colleagues? I mean, the Republican Party is this self-proclaimed stalwart bulwark against the censorship of the left. So, like, are any of them trying to justify this? Are you hearing rumblings from people who are uncomfortable with this, but who may or may not be willing to speak out? Like, what is the general sense on the other side of the aisle?
I hear very little opposition.
Yeah,
You know, the idea that they've been talking about Charlie Kirk as a beacon of free speech and to remember him as such a leader in that area and wanting to have debate. And then they turn around
5 minutes later.
yeah, literally support the president in his blatant violation of the First Amendment and Brendan Carr, and start, accusing the left and trying to silence the left or silence anyone who even criticizes not Charlie Kirk's, supports Charlie Kirk's murder, which we all abhor and condemn, but start saying, well, looking at what his legacy is and saying, maybe he said some things that were not so great. Oh, that's off limits. You cannot say anything bad
Right.
about Charlie Kirk. And it's like, give me a break. You guys are the ones who are the free speech absolutists. You were so upset about censorship by the Biden administration on social media. You had an entire subcommittee that I was on last Congress on the weaponization of the federal government and using it to censor social media companies and Republican viewpoints. And here, then you just turn around and you're saying, well, no, it's really, I only object if it's speech that I like.
Right.
I got no problem canceling speech I don't like.
Right. What is the natural conclusion of what we're seeing right now? Like, clearly this is, I mean, not a slippery slope is the most generous way to put this, but we've watched, again, I listed out the whole slew of companies that have capitulated to the Trump administration, or that have, or in instances where the Trump administration has successfully lobbied to get these people kicked off the air, whether it's Colbert, whether it's Kimmel, whether it's suing ABC or CBS or Meta and getting them all to capitulate. What does this look like a month, 6 months, a year down the line?
Well, we're at a real fork in the road right now, because this latest action was so far and away the most egregious. And it was so out in the public. And it was so clear that it is an absolute bullshit move. That even if you look at the merits of it and what Jimmy Kimmel said, there's nothing wrong with it.
Right.
I mean, certainly the Republicans. I mean, Donald Trump himself started accusing the left of being responsible for Charlie Kirk's murder before the perpetrator was identified or arrested.
Right.
And that's all Jimmy Kimmel was saying. So, but even putting that aside, right, is the idea that you can threaten the license of a media organization because you don't like what they say and that they acquiesce is next level here. We continue to go further and further, and he continues to push the envelope. And so, look, there are different ways we can do it. Donald Trump is not going to care what I say or what your listeners likely say, or likely what your listeners say. But there are many Republicans in the House, especially, who are vulnerable in their elections next year. And the closer and closer that we get to those elections, the more and more the pressure that the American public puts on them will have an impact because Donald Trump does not want to lose the majority. That's why he's rigging the entire
Right.
rigging the entire system by redistricting all over the country. But if he starts to see that the polling and the prospects for his House majority and their vulnerable members are getting worse and worse, that will have an impact on him. And so I think it's got to be a combination of that and then putting pressure on corporate America to stand up for our values, which I wish we didn't have to do, but we certainly do now.
I want to ask one more question here, and it's a little bit of a selfish question, but in as we continue to recognize the extent to which legacy media and these legacy outlets are not in it to defend First Amendment rights or free speech or democracy itself, I think the onus does fall more and more on folks in the independent media space to pick up where legacy media isn't meeting the moment. And so there is some concern that as Donald Trump has leaned on these legacy outlets, that he'll then turn his attention to the platforms where all of our content creators, where all of our content is posted, and to try and lean on TikTok, lean on Google, lean on YouTube and Instagram and Snapchat to suppress speech that is, like he's doing everywhere else, critical of him. And so do you have concern about that? Is there any bulwark to prevent him from overstepping in very much the same way that he's overstepping as it relates to legacy media?
Yeah, I am concerned. I mean, look, the legacy media world, as you describe it, is now there almost all of it is just part of larger corporations that are public companies that have earnings and have shareholders and are far more worried about their bottom line than they are about the First Amendment. What if he goes after the platforms? We're in a different world because remember, that's exactly what they have been railing against
Right.
for years. And the platforms are immune. They do have immunity from liability
Right. That's
for
that
what
Section
they say.
230 immunity, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
But the idea that Elon Musk could just decide that, all right, I'm just gonna suppress, as they say, whatever the word is, whatever speech or whatever comments I don't like, is really dangerous. And that's where I do think Congress has a role because, yes, there's free speech. And yes, these social media platforms may have immunity from liability for being held responsible for something you say. Um, but they use their algorithms in a very specific and particular way. And Congress can regulate those algorithms. And there's a lot of talk about doing it. And I think that we're going to have to ramp up those efforts.
All right. Well, we will leave it there. Appreciate your leadership on this issue, and thank you for the time today.
Thanks, Brian. Take care.